so we can just begin. So there you go. I am recording now, so whatever we've got on online now will be recorded. And this evening should be quite short and sweet. It's not going to be a long session. It is our last collab that I've got with you guys. You have got your NSS with George next week. Just get the date right, 5121. On Wednesday next week at 6:30. You've got your exam NSS with George. And I assume that the link for that will be the same as what you've already been using. But if he does send me a link between now and then obviously I will upload it for you guys as well. So that you've, and I'll also put a reminder up closer to the time as well for that. But for us, this will be our last official collab. And then you guys, where are we today? It's week 15. Thursday of week 15, which means you have got one week and one weekend left between now and when you write your exam. So you are pretty close to the end. So just remember that over the next week while you are revising, if there's anything at all you need help with, any questions you've got on the work that you're busy revising, remember, just let me know straight away so I can help you. That is what I'm here for, and it's what I'll be sort of keeping an eye out for over the next week, is if there are any students that have any questions that they need help with. And anything else that comes my way, or any other recordings that you guys request, I'll try and get that done for you as well, if there's anything specific that you want covered. Okay. So then, as I said, this evening is also just an open mic. If there's anything that anybody wants to ask at this point of the game or this evening, anything that's on your minds about the exams or questions in the textbook or anything at all, anything that anybody wants to ask me. Either of you guys got anything that you want to ask or say, or that you're not sure of, or double check? Anything, any questions? At this point. Will there be a venue communicated for the exam? Okay, so Leica, because you guys are distance students, you should have a home venue, which means, are you talking about venue in terms of the classroom number, or are you talking about the campus? Because you should already know which campus that you are writing at. Do you know which campus that you're writing on? Okay, the classroom. I've got no idea, because I'm situated in Gqeberha, so Nelson Mandela Bay. I don't know where you are, so I don't know what the classrooms are for the different campuses, because all the students will be at different campuses around the country. So what you must do on the day is just get there a little bit earlier. And I know here at the Nelson Mandela Bay campus, in the foyer as you walk in, they've got a big TV screen where all of the assessments for the day, the module code and the classroom number and the time are up on that TV screen in the foyer. So I'm assuming that's the same with all the other campuses around the country. And if you walk into the foyer and you don't see something like that, then just go straight to the reception area and ask somebody at reception. They'll always have someone there that can tell you, who'll have that list. They usually always have that list displayed somewhere near the entrance, but there'll be someone there who can help you. So don't worry about that. You can always maybe phone the campus beforehand and just ask them if you're worried about that. But you shouldn't, they won't send out any communication with the classroom number. You'll have to find that out on the morning when you get there. I never forget, I think it was last year, I had something like early in the morning, like 7:30, I had a student phoning me in a panic, and he was in the Pretoria campus saying, ma'am, where's my classroom? I don't know where to go to write. And I was saying, oh my gosh, I can't help you. I'm sitting in Port Elizabeth and you're in Pretoria. So yeah, I know that can be something that does worry students. So let's hope that I must actually try and remember to post up as well about that to make sure that everybody knows exactly what to do when they get to the campus and they don't start panicking. Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I'm also somebody that will stress the whole night before I lie in my bed awake, worrying which classroom I'm supposed to be going, or how am I going to find my classroom, which is just silly, but I guess we do tend to overthink things like that. Okay, so Esther, nothing from you at this point. You've got no questions that you want double checked. Okay, so what I've got here is I've prepared another document, or not another document. I've prepared a document that I call the exam lesson plan, and what's on this document is just like hints and tips and exam strategy, and the most important things that you must revise, and the different things that you must know for each learning unit. So this probably, I don't know, Leica, this document that I've got on the screen now is probably, I hope, what you're looking for when you say an overview of the exam topics. But remember, I haven't seen the exam paper. I don't know what's in it, so I can't tell you what they're going to ask you this year. So obviously we know our textbooks are big, there's a lot of work there, and they can ask us any of the learning objectives. So as long as you've covered in your revision all of your learning objectives, those are the exam topics. The learning objectives are the exam topics. They will ask you those, and they will definitely not ask you anything that's not a learning objective. So that's what you must use to focus your revision on. So what I've done here, the most important thing that I really, really want students to do, remember, so you're going to have 3 hours, 180 minutes for 180 marks. So it's 180 marks, your paper, and that equals 180 minutes. So you have to write at the pace of 1 mark a minute. So what you're going to do to make sure to give yourself the best chance of doing that is when you arrive there, you will first get 15 minutes reading time at the start of the exam. So it's longer for the exam than it is for your, you guys don't do tests, so that's right. But for the other student, full-time students, they get, I think it's 5 minutes for a test, but you get 15 minutes reading time for the exam. So what I want you to do in those 15 minutes is you're going to not try and read in detail every single question, but you want to scan the questions. So there'll be, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 questions. You're going to scan them to see what they're asking you in each question. What is the required? What are you going to have to do to get the marks for each question? And then while you're reading through that required, you're going to decide which question you are going to complete first, and that will be the question that you know the best. So that's what you're going to be doing. As soon as you see a question, oh, I know this, I learned this, I know exactly how to do this, I can do it quickly, you're going to do that question first. So that those questions you need more time with, or that you don't know so well, you'll leave those to the end, so that all the extra time that you've saved on the questions you can do quickly, you'll use that time for completing those questions that you want to spend time on. And remember also, if there's a 10-minute question or a 15-minute question, do those first as well, so that you get those 10 or 15 marks down on the paper, and they're done and finished and behind you. And you leave the longer 30, 40-minute questions for the end, where you've then got time to sit and take your time with those questions. Okay, so you want to complete the question that can give you the most marks on the board first in the shortest possible time. This is so, so, so important. Okay. And remember, you can do the questions in whatever order you want to. You don't have to do them first question 1, then question 2, then question 3. Absolutely not. Whatever order you want to do them, and you must decide what that order is going to be for your best benefit. So then also linked to that, the other thing that you must do is you must keep track of how many minutes you've spent on each question as you are doing that question. So you need to take a watch, if possible, with you, because I know in the venues you've got the invigilator and they write time on the board, but they generally only write every half an hour and then tell you when half an hour is passed. But you've got 10 mark and 15 mark and 20 mark questions, and you need to know from when you start a 10 mark question, you need to know when 10 minutes has passed so that you can stop working on that question and go on to the next question. You do not want to steal minutes from another question. So if you take 20 minutes to do a 15-minute question, you've stolen 5 minutes away from all your other questions, and you can't get that time back, which means you're now going to have less time to do those other questions. So you have to borrow, if you don't have a watch, borrow a watch from somebody, but make sure that you can keep track of that time as you're going along. So what I always used to do in exams, on your exam paper at the top right-hand side of each question, in brackets, they've got 20 marks or 30 marks or whatever the number of marks is. So let's say you start a question that's 20 marks and you start the question at 8:30. What I used to do is right next to where it says 20 marks, I used to write 8:30, and then I used to add 20 minutes on, which would take me to 8:50. And then next to that, I would put a dash and then 8:50. And then I would start the question. So as I was working, I could keep glancing up at the top to see, okay, when it gets to 8:50, I must be finished with this question and move on to the next. If you don't track that when you start the question, you won't know, oh, what time did I start this question? How many minutes have I been working on it for? Just these two things alone can make a difference of easily 20% extra in your exam marks if you manage the strategy properly. It's like probably the most important thing you can do, especially in an accounting exam. Time is of the essence. It is a long paper. You have to manage those 3 hours right from minute number 1. Okay. So please remember that. And then also, as you said before, what are the exam topics? And I mentioned the learning objectives. So again, that is super important. Make sure that you know for each learning unit that you have go to the beginning of that learning unit in your either your module outline or on Learn, and they've got the list of learning objectives. And then as you study each one, then you tick it off. You say, okay, I know that one, I know that one, I know that one. And then your theory questions, you're going to use your learning objectives to know which theory questions to prepare for, because only learning objectives will be asked. Nothing else will be asked. So make sure that you have prepared for being able to answer all those paragraph questions that are learning objectives, so that when those questions come up, you can quickly write down the answers and you're not going to lose marks because you didn't learn the correct theory. And then the other thing in terms of preparing for the exam, remember that accounting, it's a skill. And all skills, we only get good at them when we practice them. So a skill, it's the same thing as learning to ride a bicycle or playing a musical instrument or playing a sport. Those are all skills, and the only way we get good at them is by repeating them over and over and over again until we get more comfortable and things flow and we remember things more as we go along. So that's how you've got to prepare for your exam. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Questions, examples, calculations. Okay, so your textbook you must use as your chief source of revision, and only when you feel ready and you've gone through all of those examples and questions that I've mentioned in your announcements, then go and practice with past papers, because really everything that you need is in the textbook. So make sure that you've covered all the learning objectives in your textbook, and then do your practicing with extra questions if you've got time. So then I've made a list here of just some certain areas that, again, make sure in your revision hours that you have absolutely concentrated on making sure that you're completely comfortable with knowing your VAT categories. So that's standard rated, exempt, non-allowable, and zero rated, that you know which items fall under which category, so that in any transaction that you get, when you see what the item is that the company is either purchasing or selling, you know whether to add VAT or claim VAT on that particular item, because you know what its category is. The non-allowable items, remember, if the business purchases goods, and it can be a standard rated good with VAT included, but if it's a non-allowable item, it just means they're not allowed to claim that input VAT when you put that item into their cash book purchases or creditors journal. And then obviously also your VAT calculations, make sure that you've practiced those, so you can add that to an excluding VAT amount. If you've got an including VAT amount, you can easily calculate what the excluding amount is and the VAT amount is from that. Backwards and forwards, including VAT, excluding VAT, VAT, add it, subtract it, and so on. Backwards and forwards until you're 100% certain that you'll always get that calculation correct, because even now when I'm marking second assignment, students are still getting their VAT calculations wrong, and that's when they've got an open textbook in front of them. Okay, so make sure that you practice that. Memorize the VAT categories and practice your VAT calculations. And then same thing with your markup calculations and your gross margin calculations. Again, that's just a matter of memorizing your little formulas and then practicing them to make sure that you can always get those right, and you know how those work. And then the differences between our two inventory systems, the periodic and the perpetual inventory systems. Make sure, again, you know exactly which general ledger accounts we use in the periodic system and which in the perpetual, and what the differences are when we are entering transactions if our company uses the periodic versus the perpetual. You've got very good examples and questions in the textbook to practice with that. So always make sure, don't forget, just revise periodic and perpetual again before the exam, so you don't read a question and it says periodic and you suddenly think, oh my goodness, what does that mean? What do I have to do differently? And then also in your revision and in your preparation for overall, 100% sure that you know your little dead click memory jogger. So those accounts that increase on the left-hand side of the T account, the debit side, expenses, assets, drawings. Those accounts that increase on the right-hand side of the T account, in other words, on the credit side, liabilities, income, and capital. And then, very important, the table on page 53 in your textbook, that chart of accounts, make sure that you can easily identify when you've got an account name, is that account that I'm looking at, is it an expense or an asset? Is it a liability or is it income? Because if you can't identify that, then you are going to battle to know whether to increase it on the left-hand side or to increase it on the right-hand side. And then also your two proprietary accounts, drawings and capital. Every single time that the business has a transaction with the owner of the company, we only use drawings or capital as the one side of our double entry. If the owner is taking goods out of the business, goods or cash, then we debit the drawings account and then credit either the bank or the inventory account. And if the owner is contributing either money or goods to the business, then we credit the capital account and then debit either the bank or the asset account. Okay, so make sure that you understand exactly how that works and that you can identify it quickly. And there is a nice question for practicing that in your textbook, a long list of accounts, and you can quickly identify, is it an expense, an asset, a liability, an income, etc. And also practice that until you can do that quickly, because remember, time is important. So you don't want to be sitting there and pondering for 2 minutes trying to decide which category an account belongs in. Then the other thing that you really need to know backwards, so all these things that I'm mentioning here, your VAT calculations and categories, your markups, and your dead click, these are all absolute foundation knowledge that you need for your accounting. You can't do any of the chapters if you don't know these basics. So your accounting equation, remember on the left-hand side of our equation, we've got assets, and then we've got the equal sign, and on the right-hand side of our equal sign, we've got owner's equity plus liabilities. The left-hand side must always exactly equal the right-hand side. So that's where our double entry system comes in, because if we only did a single entry, journal entry, we would be doing something to one side of the equation, which would then make our equation out of balance. So there have to be two entries so that after our transaction has been processed, the left-hand side of the equation still exactly equals the right-hand side. So how do we calculate owner's equity? Owner's equity is always the opening capital at the beginning of the year minus the drawings for the particular year plus the profit for that particular year. So capital plus profit minus drawings. And that's how we work out our owner's equity at the balance at the end of any financial year. And how do we work out profit? Profit is always all of my income added together minus all of my expenses added together. So owner's equity is capital minus drawings plus profit, and the accounting equation is assets equals owner's equity plus liabilities. So again, make sure that you're comfortable with all of these. Sometimes they'll give you the income and the expenses. You've got to work out the profit. Sometimes they'll give you the profit and the capital and the drawings, and you've got to work out owner's equity. So make sure you can do all of those things. So your question 4.8 in your textbook with the 3 examples immediately before it, very good grounding practice in all of those things that I've just mentioned there before. And I think I've put this in your announcements as well in that tutorial letter that I posted for you. Then also your question 5.2 in your textbook, you must use that question for your revision, because that question, in part 3 of that question, they explain the difference between trade discount and settlement discount and what the journal entries are for those. And what's the other part in question 5.2? What page number is that? See if I can find it quickly. Yeah, part 3 explains the discounts. And what else was in there? Transactions. Okay, yeah, that part 3 is really the most important part in your question 5.2. But there isn't anywhere else in your textbook where they explain trade discount and settlement discount. So that's where you're going to go. You're going to go to the solution of that question to study that. And then also very important, this is also that students get this muddled up over and over again, is make sure you understand the difference between the general journal and the general ledger, because you will have to do general journals in the exams and you will have to do general ledgers. So sometimes the question will mention a general journal, sometimes it will mention a general ledger. General journal is one of our subsidiary journals. So remember, your subsidiary journals are cash book receipts, cash book payments, petty cash, your creditors allowances, creditors journal, debtors allowances, debtors journal, and your general journal. Those 8 journals are your subsidiary journals. The general journal is one of those journals in which we enter the transactions that our business has encountered throughout the year. Then the general ledger, that is our set of T accounts into which we post all of these totals of the subsidiary journals. Those column totals from the subsidiary journals get posted into the T accounts in the general ledger at the end of each month or end of each financial year. And all of those T accounts make up our trial balance. So our trial balance is a list of all of our general ledger accounts. And the format of a general ledger account is the T account with the name across the top. And our T is on the left-hand side. We write down any amount we want to debit to that account. And on the right-hand side, we write down any amount that we want to credit that particular general ledger account. Okay. And practice entering transactions into the general journal. The general journal, we use that for those sundry transactions that don't belong in one of our cash journals or one of our credit journals. So any transaction that isn't a cash transaction or a credit transaction, you will then put into the general journal. Okay. And then common errors. So guys, anything else that you want to ask at this point about anything that I've gone through so far? Anything that you... These are really, really important bits and pieces. Nothing yet. Okay. So we're nearly done. There's not too much more that I want to go through. And then I will post this document for you guys, so you will have it to go through on your own. And remember, you're going to use this document as a check sheet to make sure that you have covered and know all of these important things. So then just some common errors. These are just places that the students tend to make the same errors year after year. Okay, perfect, Esther. That's great. In all of your journals, you have got that sundry accounts column on the right-hand side. So always make sure that you know how that sundry column works and you know how to complete it. Let's see if I can find a page with one on it quickly while I'm looking here. So also remember your sundry accounts column, even though in our sundry accounts column, we are entering lots of different general ledger account names in the details column, the amount column in the sundry accounts must have a total as well, because in all of our journals, whatever the main column is, which is our first column, so in your cash books, your main column is going to be that first bank account. In your petty cash, the main column is petty cash. Creditors, you've got creditors control, and in your debtors, you've got debtors control. That will always be the very first column in any of your journals. Then all of the columns to the right-hand side must, when you add them up, those totals must exactly equal the total in your main column. So for instance, in cash book receipts, we're going to debit my bank account with all of the money that I received, and I'm going to credit all the different accounts, different income accounts where that money came from. So I might have 3 or 4 different income accounts, add them together. They must all add up to exactly what the total debit is that's going into my bank account. And that is basically us using those subsidiary journals to create a journal entry that we're then going to post into our general ledger. So make sure that you understand how those columns and the totals and the adding up and that journal entry that we are creating, how that works. Then when it comes to that, there's a couple of these 3 areas that students consistently get muddled up. So if you've got a transaction and it is a rental transaction, If the rent is for a commercial or business premises, then, and the vendor is a VAT registered vendor, then rent is a standard rated supply and we must add VAT to that rent, or that rental that they're charging us will include VAT. So business premises rental, standard rated supply includes VAT. If it's domestic rental, in other words, for a house that somebody is going to live in, that is exempt from VAT. And even if the landlord is a VAT registered vendor, if he rents a house to somebody, he will not add VAT to that rental because domestic rental is exempt. So remember always when you see rental, immediately have a look, is it business rental or is it domestic rental? Business rental, standard rated, domestic rental, exempt. And then when we get transactions on our bank statement that the bank has charged us, again, the common areas that students muddle up is bank charges on the bank statement. That's a service that the bank is supplying to you, which is a standard rated service, and so bank charges include VAT. If the bank is either paying you interest on your bank account or charging you interest, interest is not a service or a goods, so it is exempt from VAT. Interest, we never add VAT to interest. So if you see interest on your bank account, on your bank statement, that will always be exempt from VAT. When you see bank charges on your bank statement, that will always include VAT. Sometimes there's something called a government levy that we see on our bank statement. That a government levy is already a tax and we don't tax a tax, so that will also be exempt from VAT. Government levy will also no VAT. On that it will be exempt. And then our municipal account statements as well. If there is a rates charge on our municipal account, rates is also already a tax, and because we don't tax a tax, we don't add VAT to rates. Rates is exempt from tax. All other services on your municipal account, your water, your electricity, refuse removal, all of those other services, those are services, they're standard rated and they will include VAT. Okay, so only the rates portion of your municipal bill is exempt from VAT. Everything else will include VAT. So for you guys, your last 3 learning units, 7, 8, and 9, those are your exam learning units because you haven't been tested on those before in your assignments. So I've just made a couple of notes just on those 3 learning units. Just to give you some pointers, some main parts, and just to tell you which sections that you must just make sure that you understand, just to help you to understand exactly what the most important sections are of those chapters. Just for your learning unit 7 with your debtors and your creditors ledger, remember if it is a debtors ledger, the main column, balance column on the right hand side, will be a debit balance. If it is a creditors ledger, then that main column on the right hand side headed balance will be a credit. And all of your transactions, you then have to decide, is that transaction increasing or decreasing my balance? So if it is a debtors ledger, if it's going to increase the balance, the transaction goes in the debit column. If it's going to decrease the balance, the transaction goes into the credit column. Vice versa, if it is a creditors ledger, if the transaction that you are going to enter into the ledger increases the balance, you're going to put it into the credit column, and if it decreases the balance, you'll put it into the debit column. So just remember, creditors ledger, the balance is a credit. Debtors ledger, the balance is a debit. Salaries and wages, I've just given you specific examples to make sure that you follow and you go through, and also always make sure you know the steps of recording salaries, and those steps are written out for you nicely in the textbook. And year-end procedures as well. This one as well, to revise your year-end procedures. Always make sure, again, you know what those steps are for the year-end procedure, and you also know the order in which they are completed. If you just memorize those steps, then your year-end procedures is going to be easier. Okay, so I will post this so you guys can read through that and use these as just little notes to make sure that you've revised everything that's important. Okay, guys, so excuse me, that's really the most important things that I wanted to just share with you this evening. Bar, as I say, if there were any questions in the open mic section. And then, as always, if you've got any questions between now and when you write your paper on the 20th, please let me know straight away. There's no question that's unimportant or too small, anything at all. Just let me know. Okay. So last chance is there. Hi, Melissa, I see you've joined us as well. So this has been recorded, so you'll be able to go listen to everything recording tomorrow. Oh, okay, thanks, Leica. That's nice to know. I've really tried to keep it to those important things that I know that the students battle with. And have you got any questions, Melissa? Was there anything that you wanted to ask this evening? Anything specific that you wanted to comment on or ask at all? Nothing else. And Esther, you still good? Nothing else? Okay, perfect. Okay, guys, then I'm going to wish you the very, very best of luck for your exams, and I look forward to marking your papers. Yeah, let's cross fingers for a really nice paper. And remember, the papers get better and better the more you practice. So just, yeah, crossing fingers for a good paper and wishing you the very best of luck. Okay, thanks, guys. I'm going to end the recording now.